Good morning, and welcome to the first Fall 2021 Rady Executive Breakfast Series. My name is Monica Sellas, Director of Development at the Rady School of Management at UC San Diego, and it is my pleasure to be your host this morning. Before we start, I want you to celebrate with me our dear colleague, Cliff Carter, who is a big part of this event, and it is his birthday. So thank you so much, Cliff, for being here. The Rady Breakfast Series started years ago to connect our Rady community with high-level executives to explore exciting and engaging topics. Today is no exception, as we are proud to present a UC San Diego alumna and a sustainability leader in a Fortune 500 energy infrastructure company here in San Diego. Before continuing our program, we want to give our most heartfelt thanks to Union Bank for sponsoring this event. Union Bank has been a strong partner of the Rady School of Management since its inception, and we could not be more grateful. This event is held in a Zoom webinar format. So I want to remind everyone that there will be a time to ask questions at the end of the presentation. Please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. To set the stage for this awaited event, I'm now pleased to introduce our fearless leader, Dean Lisa Ordonez.
Thank you and good morning, and thank you all for being here. And as Mooney said, this is our first breakfast series event of the new academic year. And unfortunately, we obviously can't be in person, but I'm happy to share that our students are back, our faculties are back, and our staff is slowly moving back as well to campus. And you know, I get this question all the time. You know, by the way, I just finished 2 years at the Rady School, most of it not on campus. And I get the question all the time, oh, you know, the assumption is that things are so bad. How are you? How are you dealing with, well, it is a tough time. It is a tough time for the world. It's a tough time for, you know, the economy in many ways, but we are doing really well at Rady. In fact, we have just finished 18 years and we have the highest enrollments in both graduate and undergraduate programs ever at Rady. So we are doing really well. Everyone's rising to the challenge, and I really appreciate the hard work that our faculty have been doing to make sure that the educational is just a little different last year. Now we're in face-to-face, but really did their best to make sure that everybody was getting the information and the education they needed. We just during this time finished our strategic plan, which we are starting to announce, and we'll have an updated website. So very excited about many of the portions of the plan. There's 5 pillars, or we're calling strategic intents. 2 of them are really relevant for today. One is fostering vibrant and long-term partnerships, like the one that I appreciate here with Sempra and with Lisa. And the other is ensuring equity, diversity, inclusion, and having Lisa here as an incredible leader is an example of all the things that we can do when we include all voices in organizations. So our speaker is an example of the path that we want to take, continuing the spirit of environmental innovation with events like the Triton Innovation Challenge, where entrepreneurs and innovators pitch ideas for companies dedicated to making a positive environmental impact. And we've been doing that event for 5 years as an annual business competition focusing on fostering creativity and developing environmentally focused technologies generated by members of the UC San Diego community. And stay tuned for the next one. It's amazing in terms of sustainability and what our community offers. Another example of alignment with today's presenter is how grateful we are to have partnered with Sempra in the past as leading supporter of Rady through our Summer Institute for Emerging Managers and Leaders to increase diversity of graduate students enrolled in our business school. And we're planning another one of these events this coming summer. So more details on that soon. And, you know, having an outstanding example of a UC San Diego alumna like Lisa Alexander, modeling conscientious leadership and as an inclusive contributor to our community makes us very proud as a campus. So I want to thank all of you for being here, but I especially want to thank Lisa for speaking today, and also Monique and Cliff for doing such a great job, as usual, pulling us all together. So Lisa, I think I'm handing it over to you.
Dean Ordonez, thank you so much for that warm welcome. And Monique, thank you for organizing this, and happy birthday to Clifford. And to everyone who's attending, so congratulations on beginning a new school year and on making the investments in yourselves to continue to learn and see how you can make the biggest impact in our community and in our world. It's true, I am an alum of UC San Diego, and what I learned there at Thurgood Marshall College a number of years ago was that what you get out of things is what you put into them. And during my time at UCSD, I was really privileged to be part of the student government. I was part of a provost council at Thurgood Marshall. I don't know if you still have that there. Each of the colleges did at the time. And in my senior year, I also had the opportunity to chair the registration fee committee, which at the time used and allocated registration fees that are so dear to so many, and invested in REMAC. So REMAC didn't exist most of my college career. It was built, and finally we opened it my senior year. And now to walk along the campus and see how things continue to mature and evolve is really striking. I want to reflect a bit on Dean Ordonez's remarks, particularly about partnerships and diversity and inclusion. In my role as Chief Sustainability Officer for an energy infrastructure company, I'll tell you a bit more about that, but I see a few things. Number one is that climate change is a hard trend. It is happening. It's happening with more intensity and with greater impacts to our communities. Every year we see it, unfortunately, whether it's wildfires here in California, severe storms like Storm Uri in Texas earlier this year, flooding in Germany and elsewhere. We see the effects of our warming climate in so many different ways, with a disproportionate effect on those who are most vulnerable and who live in places that don't have the resources to create the climate resilience. And what we know are a few things. In the face of climate change, I truly believe that business has access to the tools of innovation to make some of the greatest impacts on our world. That's the first thing. The second thing is that our ability to make an impact is constrained only by our ability to partner. So I appreciate Dean Ordonez's remarks about that. Truly, partnership is the wheel, the flywheel of innovation. And we see whether it's public-private partnership. For example, our company recently announced a memorandum of understanding with one of the large national labs that's part of our country's network of think tanks sponsored by Department of Energy. Whether it's partnerships there or partnerships with tech companies, whether it's ideas that you all may be working on in the context of the challenge that Dean Ordonez just mentioned, that is going to be the key to the future. So innovation through partnership, we think, is going to unlock our ability to become more climate resilient and to achieve the needed net zero aspirations of our world. Then key to innovation is diversity, equity, and inclusion. What we know and what many studies show is that the more diverse experiences and perspectives and people you have at a table at any point in time, the more likely you're going to have better outcomes. You're going to lower risk, see more opportunities, and also bring more innovative ideas forward. So Dean Ordonez's remarks really struck at the hub of how we think at Sempra, and certainly how I think. I'll close my intro just by noting that during my time at UCSD, the whole time I thought I was going to go into public service. And it was thanks to UCSD that the career development process, I had an interview with a company called Accenture, big management consulting company. I did it for practice. And ended up getting a job offer. And at that time, I thought, well, maybe the greatest way for me to make an impact is to learn how businesses work and how I can harness the capabilities of business to make the positive impact in the world that I really aspired to do. So that was the bet I made. It was not what I'd anticipated, but it was thanks to UCSD and the career development process that I launched on that path and am here today. So with that, I'd like to transition to give you a bit of context for what I do and how we at Sempra are thinking about sustainability. Thank you. So our company, we're one of the few Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered here in San Diego. We serve nearly 40 million consumers in the United States. Their electricity, we heat their water every day. That's more than any other US energy infrastructure company. So we're really proud to be serving what essentially is nearly 10% of the US population every day, helping keep the lights on. We have assets of nearly 70 billion. Our market cap is over 40 billion. And we haven't been around for that long as a corporation. We were formed back in the late 90s as the merger of two companies, what is now San Diego Gas and Electric, who you might all be familiar with, is serving your utility needs, and a company called SoCal Gas, which is the nation's largest natural gas distribution utilities. They came together in the late 90s and really formed the foundation for our company, which has since evolved over time. We have a number of different assets across North America. We're one of the top 3 renewables developers in Mexico. We're the largest private energy infrastructure company in Mexico. In addition to having the nation's largest natural gas distribution utility, San Diego Gas and Electric has the highest percent of renewables at any given day that's flowing through their system, that their system enables. Also highest penetration of rooftop solar and EV charging. We also have Texas's largest electric transmission and distribution utility, serving millions there and enabling record amounts of renewables to flow through their system. So it's a fun fact that Texas actually tends to have higher percents of renewables on any given day than anywhere else in the country. And it's largely thanks to the wind generation that is quite prevalent in certain parts of that region, and companies like Oncor, our Texas utility, that's able to connect those renewables to demand centers in Dallas and elsewhere. So we're really proud to have that strong footprint. And that in turn gives us a tremendous opportunity to do the right thing and to improve not just how we deliver energy, but also the communities that we serve in the context of doing that. And that goes to this the bottom right square there, which talks about our charitable giving. So our charitable giving is a key aspect of how we serve. And we don't only think about operating our infrastructure, but what's more important is the context in which we do it. Make sure that we're lifting everyone up as much as we can. We're better when our communities are stronger. Next slide. And to that end, where we start at Sempra is with our culture. We call this our high performance culture. This was introduced several years ago. We saw a need to create alignment across each of our operating companies that we own and our corporate parent, which is where I work. And the need for alignment was really with an eye towards creating more runways for innovation, for best practice sharing as appropriate, and also for giving all of our 19,000 employees some commonality, some shared sense of purpose. We recognize that work isn't just work anymore. It's about finding a place where you can be nurtured, realize your full potential, find ways to contribute in ways that are aligned to your personal values, not just what the business needs are. So our culture is really anchored to this idea of delivering energy with purpose, which is our vision. And the idea is, how do we deliver not just physical energy, heat and light energy, but also the energy of our thousands of employees? How do we bring that forward every day to create value? And when we think about doing it with purpose, it's a play on words as well. How do we do that, operate our business purposefully, strategically, with a laser focus on priorities? What do we say no to? And in turn, how do we operate with a sense of greater purpose for improving not just our business, but the lives and needs of all of the stakeholders who we serve? So our vision is shared across our companies, and you can see here our mission, which also helps serve alignment, more near-term focus on what we're trying to accomplish. and we're anchored by our values, and you see those here. Something that I want to reflect on is the shape the future idea. We have a real strong view that the future isn't predetermined, but rather that we can play a very active role in shaping it, no matter what role we have within the company. So whether it's working with policymakers or helping a customer in need, every action we take has the potential to create a new trajectory, one that's even better and that creates more value for those who we're serving. So we have a really active view of the role that we can play in creating a better world. Next slide, please. So here's the bit of a broader context. I started closer in on our company. Now I'm going to start expanding it. So the role of utilities, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I really didn't think about utilities other than the monthly bill that we had to pay. Over time, those bills have gotten higher, and it's for a lot of important reasons related to climate resilience, infrastructure hardening in the face of severe weather, digitalization, which will help us get smarter and decarbonize. But nonetheless, most people tend not to think about utilities too much, except in the context of the monthly bill. What we actually see is if you peel back the fabric of our country, and any country, it's connected by a network of gas and electric infrastructure that is essential to not just keeping life comfortable for most of those in developed worlds, but also essential for driving the economy. When you think about whether it's our ports and all the ships that are coming in every day to bring us all the goods that we're buying from Amazon, that's powered by our utility infrastructure. EV charging powered by utilities, manufacturing and industry. And by the way, another fun fact, SoCal is home to the nation's single largest manufacturing hub. That's in that LA basin area, powered by utilities, right? So pretty much everything that you think about, from our internet connection right now to the lights you're using, require this massive gas and electric network to keep the lights on and your more homes heated, and to achieve other economic benefits as well. So I think it's important that it's not talked about a lot, but utilities really underpin the prosperity and well-being of our entire country. Now, related to that, utilities also are a key player in addressing climate change. And we'll talk a bit about that as well. But as you think of utilities as getting energy from point A to point B, another role we can play is helping decarbonize that energy. So whether it's making the transmission of energy, gas or electric, more efficient, reducing leaks, increasing resilience, or working with generators to decarbonize the sources of energy. So how do we go from coal to natural gas to renewables? How do we think about clean storage? So when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing, utilities are the ones working with policymakers and regulators to figure out how we can keep the lights on, even when renewables aren't flowing and aren't able to feed the system. And that's where we think about battery storage, other forms of non-electric storage, and other solutions like EV charging. Your electric vehicle might one day help power your home with the charged battery that it holds. So there's a lot of thinking that utilities are leading to figure out how we can not just continue to deliver energy to create these economic benefits, but also do so in a way that's increasingly decarbonized and gets our world to a point of net zero. One note that I'll make, and I think this might be the next slide. Let me check that. Nope, it's in a couple more slides, but what I was just saying is really in the context of developed worlds, we see a whole different dynamic around energy in emerging markets. So I do want to make sure we spend some time on that as well. I'll come back to that though. Next slide, please. So in the context of serving 40 million people, their essential energy needs, we have a sustainability strategy that anchors on 4 key ideas. First, we know that doing business in a sustainable way is good for our shareholders. There's no daylight between how we think about sustainability and how we deliver economic value for our shareholders. I'm happy to talk more about that. And in the context of that, we really view sustainability and thinking from an E, S, and G lens, environment, social, governance, as being key to being better at identifying risks and opportunities related to environment, social, and governance. So ESG or sustainability, whatever you call it, is really key to running a better business and creating more value, not just for shareholders, but for all those we serve. At Sempra, there are 4 key pillars, and Dean Ordonez mentioned that in Rady's own strategic plan that there's some key pillars. It's a great organizing force to think in terms of those smaller nuggets that really express where you want to go. So for our business, our 4 pillars are enabling the energy transition. That top speaks to decarbonization. It speaks to climate resilience. It also speaks to issues of equity and affordability. The second relates to driving resilient operations. That's kind of fundamental. How do we keep the lights on? The third area of sustainability is to achieve world-class safety. So in a business like ours, it can be very dangerous, and safety leads first, particularly for our employees, those who are working on high voltage transmission lines, working on gas systems, moving heavy equipment. First and foremost, we're focused on making sure that our employees can go home every day injury-free. And to that end, the same with our communities. So safety is a really key table stake for anyone operating in our sector, and certainly it is here at Sempra. And finally, championing people. So you can't do any of 1, 2, or 3 listed here without having a real commitment to investing in our people. That starts with diversity and having a place where people feel they can belong, where they're included, where their ideas matter, and where they can work to their fullest potential and see our company as a place to develop and get even better and make a real impact aligned with their own values. That's partly what we mean by championing people. Safety is also part of that, but largely it's about investing in our people because that underpins our ability to do anything else well. One thing that I'll also point out, and this is a key part of not just our sustainability strategy, but our business strategy, is that our commitment to achieve net zero on not just our own operations, but also the markets we serve by 2050. So this is a notable commitment in 2 ways. The first thing is most companies, when they think about a net zero goal, think about it or express it really in terms of what they can directly impact with their own operating footprint. So you think of Amazon or Google saying net zero, it's for their data centers largely and other warehouses, other parts of their own operations. When a company like ours, when Sempra says net zero on all 3 scopes of emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, for those of you who are familiar with that vernacular, what we mean is we're not just going to clean up our own operations and decarbonize there, but we're going to deliver solutions, deliver increasingly decarbonized energy to help our customers and the markets where we operate achieve their own net zero goals. So what that does in effect is align our company's strategy and investment thesis to decarbonizing all the markets we serve. And remember, I noted earlier that we serve nearly 40 million people, nearly 10% of the US population. So think of the impact that can be made as we're on this journey to achieve net zero across our operations and for our markets. It's a tremendous impact, and all 19,000 of our employees are so excited at the opportunity to do the right thing, to make money while doing the right thing and helping all of our stakeholders. So we can talk a bit more about that as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this goes back to that point I made about the developed world versus more emerging economies. So as we think about climate change, it isn't just local. Here in California, we're home to some of the world's most boldest ambitions and aspirations on climate. We're excited to be part of that. It's helped make our company better over time. But we also realize that emissions from China coal plants are in the air that we breathe every day here in San Diego, a couple of days after those emissions travel across the ocean to here. So we are interconnected. At our company, we think both about how we can help address our own markets as well as others. And we do have a big business called Sempra Infrastructure that's exclusively focused on decarbonizing global markets. One thing that I think is interesting is last year, Brookings Institute published an article titled, "You Can't Fight Pandemics Without Power, Electric Power." And that really highlighted the challenges faced by many developing countries in treating and even diagnosing disease without access to electricity. You may have seen stories about deep energy poverty in certain regions of our world where women in particular tend not to be able to do much other than to build the fire that is required every day, find the firewood to build that. And it really has a significant economic impact and impact on the well-being of communities when so much time is spent trying to source fuel. Fuel, by the way, that tends to burn more dirty than other sources that more modernized economies can run on. A couple other statistics. Today, nearly 1 billion people, 1 billion in the developing world live without access to electricity. Nearly 3 billion still burn biomass, wood, dung, other sources for heating. And along with that comes really significant emissions. So it's not just the economic, health, and well-being effects of not having access to a reliable and clean grid, but it's also the climate emissions as well. Last year, investment, actually, I'll give you a different statistic, I think. As we think about global GDP growth, 80% of that growth between now and 2040 is expected to come from these emerging markets and these emerging nations. And at the same time, these same areas have led the world's emissions, significant growth, almost 110% over the same period. So as much as we have strong aspirations here in California and in San Diego specifically, if we're really going to take on climate change, we also need to be thinking about how we can help emerging markets continue to grow, achieve health and prosperity for their people, but in a way that doesn't continue to contribute significant levels of emissions. And you see that mentioned in a lot of the COP26 discussions and media coverage as a rising trend. Right now, much of the coverage is focused on developed nations, emissions contributions, and what developing countries really need to be doing more of to address climate change. But know that developing countries not only are disproportionately affected by climate change, but they're on track to have incredible opportunity to be helped by others and shoring up and hardening their own energy infrastructure in a way that's clean. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we think about solving global climate change or our own more immediate company aspiration for net zero, we think that there's 3 key strategies to achieve that. And these strategies are based on a number of studies and literature that we've followed over the years. The International Energy Agency is one. The EIA here in the US is another, along with great work published by the national labs. UCSD's own David Victor has contributed really meaningfully to much of this thinking, as have a number of other leaders in energy policy, economic policy, and other aspects. So if we had to distill what the path to a net zero future is, we think it rests on 3 things, 3 Ds we call them. The first D, decarbonization. There's no question that we need deep electrification in consumer markets, whether it's buildings, or passenger vehicles. And along with that, there's also no question that we need deep decarbonization of industrial sectors, manufacturing, heavy-duty transportation. That might require a different source of energy. That's where we're excited about green hydrogen, also some carbon capture and sequestration, and other sources to decarbonize what are called harder to abate sectors that really can't be electrified because of their processes, their industrial processes. And the second D is diversification. And it really speaks to this idea that there's not one solution. We need all of the above strategies to help decarbonize. That means that clean fuels, zero carbon molecules plus zero carbon electrons, we believe in the future will need to work together to deliver not only decarbonization, but also climate resilient energy systems. The third D is digitalization. So as I talk about diversified energy networks and increasingly decarbonized energy networks, including rooftop solar, EV charging, battery storage, and other solutions, think about what's required to actually make that happen. And it's heavy digitalization. So we're moving from a model where decades ago you might have 10 people, mostly men, in operation centers running these utilities in a more manual way. Now the systems are so complex that we really depend on AI, predictive analytics, external technologies like drones and sensors to more actively manage our system in a much more digitalized way. So there's tremendous opportunity for digitalization. In fact, just yesterday, I was on a panel with an executive from BP, and I couldn't agree more with his view. His area is digital, but his view is that digital strength is going to be the single greatest differentiator as we think about managing the energy networks of the future. So the company that is best in digital is probably going to be the most strongly positioned over the next 5 and 10 years. And at Sempra, we couldn't agree more. So digitalization is a really key capability to underpin any net zero aspiration. Next slide, please. And finally, bringing it all back to Sempra, as we think about all the markets we serve and our 3 key business platforms, we have aims to decarbonize each of them, and in ways that align our investments with our businesses there towards this market by market decarbonization strategy. So this just speaks to that. You'll see that in addition to having just this broad net zero strategy, we also have a number of interim key performance indicators. We're looking to get even more robust with those to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable and that our investors and other stakeholders can equally hold us accountable to achieve the net zero future. Next slide. Let's skip this one. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so a lot of this is words, right? And I know many of you likely have engineering backgrounds or other scientific backgrounds. So I'll leave you with this, and this really speaks to Sempra's commitment to our culture. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions, and your actions become your destiny, by the great Gandhi. So as we think about how we can all catapult ourselves to a future that's more equitable, where we've addressed climate change, and where globally we see more prosperity and well-being, it really starts with how we all think about these problems and what our belief system is. So at a company like Sempra, that starts with our culture, and I shared that pyramid slide early on. And I think on an individual basis, it really starts with us and a place like UCSD that is committed to bringing broad ideas of equity, broader awareness of the world. That in turn also helps inform those beliefs. So I think as part of the UCSD community, we're all part of a great thought system that can help trigger all of us to help with this trajectory that our world needs to be on. So with that, that concludes my presentation. And Monique, I think maybe we'll be able to go into some QA.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for such an interesting conversation. And yes, everyone, it's time to submit your questions. There's 3 dots in the bottom of your screen, and there's You can just click into Q&A and we will be able to see your questions. So first, Lisa, we're so pleased to hear that David Victor has helped Sempra with your sustainability efforts. As you point out, our efforts in California are but a small part of what is needed to meet the global climate challenge. Are there ways in which Sempra's work is contributing to policy changes in our country?
Yes, so great question. Thanks, Rebecca, for that. I'll give you two examples, but know that at a high level, we work very closely with policymakers. We help provide expertise, also point of view, and believe that much of the answers here rest in effective collaboration and partnership between policymakers and industry. So two key examples. One is that Sempra recently joined something called Project Veritas. It's sponsored by an NGO called the Gas Technology Institute. The aim is to provide more measurement and accountability for methane emissions upstream, meaning methane emissions produced by those who extract oil and gas. Right now, as we think about the end-to-end value chain of energy, there isn't a lot of data, accountability, or widely accepted standardized measures to track those upstream emissions. And what you find is a number of large oil and gas players, and BP is one example, who tend to be more forward in their practices to contain emissions and do things responsibly. And you see a desire for that even among smaller shops, but more independent companies have less resources and sometimes less inclination to really tighten the systems. So Project Veritas intends to bring forward a really standard way of measuring emissions. And that in turn creates a really great data set for industry to come together to commit to reductions of those emissions over time, and to create a market where companies like ours can potentially invest at a higher rate for natural gas that's sourced at a lower emissions intensity. So Project Veritas is something that we're engaged with Department of Energy on and with a number of other policymakers. And I think there's really global acceptance that this is one of the right things to be doing to help reduce emissions overall. Another example that I'll share is with respect to climate resilience. So right here in our own backyard, SDG&E is a recognized global leader in climate resilient infrastructure. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, we were able to host Gina McCarthy, who is President Biden's senior climate advisor, to visit SDG&E's Wildfire Mitigation and Emergency Operations Center. And she lauded it as state of the art. And Gina has been to a lot of facilities like this. She's brilliant and has seen a lot of things. So we were really, really pleased and grateful for her feedback. And I'll tell you a bit about what she saw there. In about 12 years ago, SDG&E, and some of you may have been here for this, had a terrible fire here in San Diego. And that fire was really a wake-up call for our company as to how we can improve our operations to mitigate the risk of wildfire. So this predated many of the wildfires that you've seen in recent years, especially those in Northern California. What SDG&E did was decide to double down on its investments towards wildfire mitigation. And today, they have one of the world's most advanced private meteorology functions right there, here in San Diego in our own backyard. We're monitoring chlorophyll level in plants out in the backcountry, out in the east, Idlewild, Brago Springs, those areas. Every 10 minutes, we're getting data on the chlorophyll levels. We have over 200 cameras, again, out east, that are equipped to detect any small plumes of smoke. And they're on an automated system whereby if there is smoke detected, automatically the system in that area will be cut off just to mitigate the risk of fire. In addition to all that, we've got advanced artificial intelligence to pull together weather data, chlorophyll level, vegetation tools that we're getting in real time, vegetation data that we're getting in real time, and bringing that together. And that data set is something that we give to NOAA, to the National Oceanic Agency here in our country, and to scientists at the federal level so that they can better understand the changing climate here in San Diego, and also determine how those tools can help understand changing climate across our country. So I think that SDG&E's wildfire capabilities are another example of how we're both feeding policymakers and helping them think differently, sharing data, and also serving as a model for others to be more climate resilient.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Here's another question. I'm so impressed that Sempra was able to embrace this goal of decarbonizing not only its own operation, but its market's operations. Could you please say more about how you were able to align and mobilize so many and such diverse stakeholders around these goals? What could other industries learn from Sempra to drive transformation?
Well, thank you for that question. And what an insightful question, because I think, I wonder if you come from an area with some political background, but you know that bringing people together around a shared goal is so exciting and inspiring, but it's also really hard sometimes. So how we were able to do it was, first, we started out with a burning platform. And that is this recognition that climate change is here. It's a hard trend. It's not going away. It doesn't matter who is in office at the presidential level here in this country or anywhere else. We see it happening and we need to do something. So I think it started with that real clarity. In the last administration, which no matter what one's politics are, I think we might agree that climate was probably not at the top of the agenda. It brought to light a second really important dynamic, which was the investment community and the capital markets increasing focus on the importance of climate. So it's not just that we saw this hard trend that we needed to respond to, we were also hearing from our investors that they believe that this is something that all companies really needed to be taking a look at and have a responsible set of approaches to deal with it. And I think the investment community was in turn hearing it from their clients. So again, regardless of who's in office, you see the capital markets really coming to bear on this. I think there's over $26 trillion in investable assets under management today that are dedicated towards some kind of climate or ESG type of solutions. So I think that capital market perspective is also a second thing that really informed our own burning platform. And the burning platform is key to getting attention. Many of our stakeholders are very supportive of any efforts to decarbonize, so that's helpful. But we also have a lot of stakeholders who are really focused on issues of equity and with that affordability and resilience. So as we look to decarbonize, it's going to require investments. That's good. But we want to be mindful too about what the impacts could be for bills up for our customers over time as well. So that's where our companies are involved continuously in conversations with stakeholders to get input on how do we bring these together? How do we balance affordability, decarbonization, along with really important issues of reliability and resilience and keeping the lights on. And I think that's where we see a lot of meaningful conversations over time. Those conversations are had more at a policy by policy level than at a really high level. But I think that you're smart to recognize that it's not just maximizing for decarbonization, but it's doing so in a way that we address issues of equity, of affordability, and resilience.
Thank you so much, Lisa. There's another comment and question here. I really appreciated your presentation. I was curious if you have suggestions for how we can drive sustainability efforts at our own firms. Are there any big themes so we can make it a business benefit instead of an important cultural, ethical business cost?
Yeah, that's also something that I've been thinking a lot about too. So I think the first thing is the capital market. So even if you're not part of a publicly traded company, you probably take out debt at certain times, or there's other financial instruments that likely your business engages with. And what we're seeing is across all aspects, whether the debt or equity markets or other ways of financing, that ESG and climate are coming to the fore. A number of firms recently, including our own, have implemented green bonds. And what we're seeing is a slight improvement in some of the interest rates on those for firms who have showed how they're addressing climate. And it's really because it ties, when you're addressing climate, you're addressing a risk to the business. And then that in turn translates into financial preference, right? So I think that's one way, is the financial perspective. I think a second driver for businesses that they really need to be thoughtful of is the desires and needs of employees. So just as climate is a hard trend in our sector, it's something that all generations are really passionate about and care about. I talked earlier about purpose, and I think it's important for businesses to show how purpose is aligned with their employees to help get the most out of employees and help their companies be a really attractive place to work. Right now is a white hot job market. It is, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this in the most recent decades. So the competition for talent is high. And I think that much of that talent is looking for a place to work where their values are really aligned. Increasingly, climate's part of that.
Here's another question. I'm not sure if I'm reading this correctly, so help me out here. It says, how do you see SB 1383 regarding organic waste and methane emissions impacting Sempra's goals for enabling the energy transition? Renewable LNG? Someone that knows what they're talking about, and I'm not sure if I read that correctly.
Yes, I see it here. That is definitely someone who knows what they're talking about. So we're really excited about SB 1383, which for those here is a California bill that's designed to encourage the use of renewable natural gas to displace fossil gas. So what is renewable natural gas? It is gas that's produced from biogenic sources, mostly today. That's gas that's produced from landfills, but probably more interestingly from dairies. So many of you have probably seen that dairies and cows tend to produce methane that tends to be one of the single largest contributors to methane here in the state of California. We have hundreds of dairies. Now there's a great market for those dairies, right? They're there because they're needed and their products are desired. But there's no doubt that there's a methane impact. So partly what this SB 1383 does is offer a path for the methane produced by dairies and other sources to be captured, keeping that methane out of the atmosphere. And in turn, that methane is being injected into our gas pipeline systems to displace fossil fracked gas. So it's kind of a twofer. If you use that methane from dairies to fuel, say, heavy duty trucks that are bringing goods from the Port of LA or Long Beach into the heartland of our country, the California state has said that methane, when used for transportation fuel, actually has a negative carbon intensity. I think it's minus 286. So if you look at renewable electricity, that's often a carbon impact of 0. RNG, sourced from dairies, renewable natural gas sourced from dairies, can be negative. And that's, again, because of this twofer effect. You're keeping it from atmosphere and then you're using it to displace fossil. So we think that there's really great potential there about using organic waste. I'll make one other note, is that recently the state of California has put in a requirement that to divert organic waste from traditional landfills and to be used in more centralized facilities where it can be more efficient to produce renewable natural gas. So it really is, it's waste to energy. It's the ultimate in recycling, and helping us decarbonize our gas systems for sure. So that's a key part of SoCalGas, the nation's largest gas utility and one of our operating companies, key part of their strategy. They're also looking at green hydrogen and other ways to decarbonize their system. Today, there's about almost 5% of renewable natural gas flowing through their core system already, just serving that heavy duty transportation market. So it's real, and the company is excited to help keep it growing.
Thank you, Lisa. There's one more question here, a couple of more questions. There is a lot of innovation in energy sector, the way we produce energy. How is Sempra going to be transitioning to stay competitive and at the same time meeting carbon footprint goals?
I see it as being one and the same. So innovation is required to meet carbon footprint. Meeting carbon footprint is required for us to be a viable and exciting business where investors want to invest and employees want to work. So we really see it, none of those things is working in opposition, but rather decarbonization and climate being at the center of our business strategy. We see tremendous investments that we can be making towards that. And in our sustainability report this last spring, we published our pathway for the types of investments we expect to make in the next 5, 10, and 10 plus years towards the net zero future. So we've aligned our investment thesis with our climate strategy, with our net zero goals. And as I said earlier, to get there, we need unprecedented innovation. And by the way, when people think of innovation, I think it's largely technology innovation, and that is certainly part of it. But for those of you who aren't engineers, we also need tremendous policy innovation. So think of the policies that helped our country and our state in particular get to high levels of renewables. We need to see that on an even broader basis, that kind of thinking. We need innovation in how we think about commercial contracts and dealing with risk of new technologies. So you might have an innovative new technology, but if you haven't figured out the way to get that commercialized or deal with the risk, it's not going to go very far. So we need innovation, not just in technology or policy or commercial agreements, really just across the board. And I think there's room for everyone to bring that innovative thinking to the space and to this problem set.
Thank you, Lisa. This is great. So there's another question here. What is the future of wind-generated electricity?
Wind?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, keep growing. Look, there's no doubt that we need increasing sources of renewable generation, whether it's solar or wind or certainly more innovations in storage as well. We're seeing certain rules and policy evolution towards offshore wind, and that might be what you're referring to in the Northeast. There's a number of projects there to help bring offshore wind and have that be part of the solution. Look, there's an interesting thing with renewables is, and California is a good example, is renewables are good, but you need a lot of land to site solar panels, especially at the rate that our state and our country needs them. Ditto wind. So how do we think constructively about the trade-off of, some people say, nature versus climate? How do we think about land use? And that's where offshore wind's an interesting solution. And we see a lot of that in Northern Europe, which tends to be a really inspiring place for a lot of how we think of energy here in California. But yes, we still need wind. We need it to be economic, and land use is going to be a rising consideration, I think, as we expand our renewables.
Thank you, Lisa, just in time. So I want also, before I end this event, and any final comments from you, and also I would like to invite Dean Ordonez to make some final comments or questions.
Lisa, did you have any summary words that you wanted to give to the audience?
Sorry, no, Sorry, I just paused there for a sec. I was just looking at all the chat. I think UCSD is one of the country and the world's premier research institutions, and it's not just the research, but it's also the broad practical policy thinking and other things that are going on. For those of you who are active in the community today, I can't think of a more exciting place to be, to prepare yourselves and to access resources that can help companies like ours think about the future. So it's always inspiring for me to be back in a university environment. And I'd like to thank Dean Ordonez, you and Monique for organizing this event.
Oh my goodness, it's we were thanking you. This was amazing and your insights were tremendous. And I want to thank the audience. You guys are pretty educated. This is the kind of things that make it exciting to be at a university, to see this level of interest and these just incredible questions, and your responses were very interesting. So thank you for taking the time. Yeah, I'm encouraged too, with the, many of our students are working on, we have a program called Lab to Market, 3 courses of our MBA program. And we invite up to 30 to 40 engineers to join as well from the Jacobs School of Engineering, who have to take an idea all the way to market. Now, those ideas might be a customer service solution, or it might be a technology, and some of them have been sustainability efforts. And so we're hoping to add to the education of people to take these incredible ideas and do something with it, make a real impact. So I just wanted to thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for spending time with us here this morning. Monique, do you have any final words?
Just thank you, Lisa Larroque Alexander, so much for taking the time to join us and share your thoughts on this vital topic. We're so grateful to have you as an alumna and to have you as a champion of UC San Diego. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Dean Ordonez, Rady students, Rady alumni, UCSD alumni, faculty, staff, and friends. Stay tuned for the next one.